What I'm going to present is a case for the existence of God based on a couple of concepts found in the CTMU, although it is not yet in argument form. These concepts include the identity of reality, self-configuration, self-containment, and global information processing. And the people I will be presenting this to will be skeptics and atheists. In the course of explaining myself, we will go through what are probably some common misconceptions about the terms used, particularly identity of reality, as well as other terms that rely on an understanding of invariance. In this case, the atheists' misunderstandings seem to come from not following the exact meaning of claims being made closely or precisely enough. When someone is new to debating, this is normal for anyone, not just atheists, but the failure to follow the claims being made led to him not being able to accurately respond, but instead presenting misleading language and a bad analogy that sprung from that. This of course reflects my failure to properly explain the underlying relationships, like those between constraint and possibility, or between containment and configuration. But I liked this discussion because, in showing that he could understand the concepts of an identity and an identity of reality, this atheist showed that in those cases when atheists have replied to the same case being made by accusing it of being gibberish or word salad, they are just being lazy, hostile, or dishonest. This guy understood it's just applying one mathematical definition to another. The rest of what I liked about it is how we can better understand the misconceptions that are arising in reaction to these concepts.
You're here to talk to an atheist, I assume. What would you like to talk to about?
I'd like to just offer an explanation for why I think God exists.
Go for it.
Well, I see God as the identity of reality. An identity is that which remains constant, even as the values of its variables change. So, the identity of reality remains constant as the objects in reality change. Reality contains everything that's real, and there's nothing outside of reality. So the identity of reality is... because there's nothing outside of reality, the identity of reality is free to configure itself. There's nothing external to reality to configure it, so all possibility and freedom comes from the identity of reality. This attributes reality with not only omnipotence, but its own free will. In addition, reality is omniscient. Right? All of the information that's real is contained and processed by reality. And to process all of the information consistently with reality is to have all the knowledge. So reality is omniscient. And since God is defined as omnipotent, omniscient, and having free will, we can call the identity of reality God.
That's really interesting. It reminds me a little bit of some kind of conversations I've had with like idealists. It doesn't fully make sense to me, and I think part of it is when we say things like reality is omniscient. I would agree that, reality is omniscient in the sense that reality is omnipresent. Reality is everywhere by definition, right? But not all of reality is everywhere, right? Earth is only in one place. Humans are only in one place in the universe. So, like, I guess I don't know how to argue with you other than to say that was a lot all at once, and maybe we could go through it piece by piece if you'd like to.
Okay. Yeah, so in order to conclude that something is true about a given entity, so like reasoning, to come to some kind of reasoned conclusion about something, you have to give it a definition first, and then you derive the properties. Yes. Yeah, you just establish whether the thing defined has these given properties, and so the argument doesn't apply to the Earth on its own, because the Earth isn't the identity of reality. It's just an object in reality.
Okay, so I guess let's start from the top of the argument, and then we can go through it piece by piece here.
So yeah, I mean, just to understand what the X is, right? So the X is this hypothetical that might have these given properties. The X is the identity of reality, and so identity is to be understood to be something which holds true even as the values of its variables change.
Something that holds true even if the set of its variable
The values of its variables, yeah.
the values of its variables. So like, my name is Scott. I was still Scott when I was 30. Now I'm 37. I'm still Scott. Like that kind of thing.
Yes, your age would be a value.
Yep. Okay. So then you said reality, the identity of reality. You said God is the identity of reality?
That would be the conclusion.
Okay. So like, when I talk about like my identity, I part of my identity is that I'm not other things, right?
Yeah.
I'm a discrete human being separate from other human beings, that has like relational connections to other people. So my identity, and I think identity as I know it inherently involves not being other things, unless you are, unless you're talking about all of reality, which is what we're talking about, right? So the identity of all of reality. If I think about comparing it to things that it's not, I would say it exists, compared to it not existing, right? Sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this first, but do you feel like I'm understanding like what you mean by identity and what you mean by reality so far?
So far, yeah.
Okay. So tell me that first premise again, and I'll just make sure we're on the same page about it.
Just defining an identity. So an identity is that which remains constant even as the values of its variables change.
Cool. Yep. Okay, so then what's the next premise?
Yeah, so I've not divided it into premises. It's just like,
sure.
It's just it's an explanation, really.
Okay. What's the next part of the explanation?
Just expresses the same thing, just in terms of reality. So the identity of reality remains constant as real objects change, and the attributes of the objects, or the variables of the the values of the attributes of the objects.
If I could get, I think defining reality as like all that there is, as in like the cosmos, or is reality like the state of affairs? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more.
I'm not sure I see the difference, so I can try and read into
Well,
one or the other.
let's see. So let's say if reality is just like, the state of affairs, the truth. Reality is anytime you say a true statement like that, you're saying a statement about reality, right? It's just the way things are. What was your second statement about? Like, I'm just trying to make sure that it felt like there was what I would think of as an equivocation fallacy. So I want to clarify on that second statement. Thank you for being patient with me.
The second statement was just attributing to reality and reality's components what the identity would be and what the variables would be.
Okay.
Yeah. So the variables.
To some extent, yeah. Oh, so variables. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, just variables include things like the objects, right? Because the objects compose and decompose. Variables also include just variables of objects, so things like charge.
Yeah.
Not sure you'd call mass a variable, but certainly velocity, momentum and velocity, and position. Yeah. And then there's values, okay. Right? So then there's like the specific numerical value that you can attribute to those.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like the ship of Theseus as like reality as the ship of Theseus, kind of. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Would be the
Yeah. So
identity,
we're just defining the identity of reality as like a combination of whatever has ever happened and whatever the state of affairs has ever been and what it currently is, and that there's a through line through all of that in time. Okay. And then what's the next statement?
It's that reality contains everything that's real. So just in the same sense that a set contains its elements, or the elements which are defined on the set. There's nothing interested, like it's basic. The next statement is just like a restatement of that. It's just like the negation. So there's nothing outside of reality. So the identity of reality is free to configure itself.
I apologize. Okay. Say that one more time. Sorry, I like using small words, so big words are sometimes just take me a few minutes.
Okay. Well, reality contains everything that's real.
Yep.
So that also means there's nothing outside reality.
Yep.
Then the identity of reality is free to configure itself, since there's nothing external to reality that could configure it.
Okay. That makes sense.
Oh, good. So this means that all possibility and freedom comes from the identity of reality.
I suppose by definition, right?
Yeah, as long as by definition here, we're the definition here just points to the actual relationships that exist. It's not sort of just this definition isn't something we're making up, right? It's a definition that's based. Yeah.
The conditions of reality allow for all possible things to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this attributes reality with not just omnipotence, but its own free will.
I think allowing for all possibilities. I don't know. I mean, like, does a football field have free will because that's where football takes place?
No, a football field doesn't, no.
So then, the universe where things take place, I don't think reality is where things take place. I don't think that inherently means that reality itself has free will. But I think that, similar to the playing field analogy, right? I think reality is where free will takes place. It's sort of almost more like the location where free will takes place. But attributing free will to reality is a little bit like saying something like, my brain is my whole body, or I can see with my feet and my hands and not just my eyes. I think it's, to me, it feels like you're attributing to reality what reality is, when I would say things happen within reality, right?
Okay, the basis, though, wasn't that reality is where things take place. The basis was that there's nothing real outside reality that would configure the inside of reality.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So the issue is about dependency, is that reality isn't dependent on anything outside of itself. Or should I say the identity of reality isn't dependent on anything outside of itself. So if it's independent of the conditions outside of reality, then there's no condition that would constrain reality, the inside of reality, with respect to the identity of reality. It just lacks external constraint, which is just the same to say that it has an elementary degree of freedom.
I think there's a difference between saying reality isn't constrained by any outside properties and saying that whatever is possible within reality could theoretically happen in reality. But I don't think that means that I don't think that it means that an outside force is constraining reality, or that reality is limitless. I think that you get what I'm saying? I'm not sure that necessarily follows.
Yeah, so you said you don't think it means that there's a force from the outside constraining reality, but I agree, right?
But reality could still have um, constraints, but that wouldn't mean that something outside reality is constraining it.
Right. So yeah, the identity of reality is the source of all constraint. So the constraints are imposed internally.
Okay.
Yeah. So that
Uh,
links in with the next claim, right? So it's that reality is omnipotent. So to have power is to impose a constraint onto something.
but omnipotent means all powerful, or are you just saying all possible power? So that's a big difference to me.
Yeah, I think that the possibilities come from the identity of reality itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? So reality has power over everything that's real because it sets the constraints over all real things. So anything that's in something has to be inside reality to be real. So if reality is constraining its internal contents, then it has constraint over everything that's real. So that just equates to omnipotence, and the possibility is defined from the inside as well.
Yeah, I guess like when I try to think about, I'm trying to think of an analogy for this, and I think, uh, and again, I don't want to accuse you of saying anything, but I'll say how it sounds to me is, um, like if I'm in a building and there's a door and I want to get out of the building and I hit, it's hard to describe, but I think I get what you're saying, and I think that my issue with it is that, um, if we just lump everything in the universe in, just call it reality, and then we sort of attribute any attribute, or I should say we take any attribute of any one thing in reality and sort of attribute it to all of reality. um that's what like confuses me, right? Like, um I am not the reason that I can't fly, right? That's the laws of physics and the planet we live on right now. But um there could be a planet small enough where I could jump and not come back down, right? So it's like I'm not the one constraining. The moon isn't the reason I can't fly, right? The sun isn't the reason I can't fly. So saying that like reality is all powerful, um, is a huge difference to me than saying like reality contains all possibilities, right? You
I'm
kind of
not.
see what I'm saying?
What I'm not seeing is how you're getting to the conclusion from the first thing that you said. So you began by saying that simply because one thing in the universe has some attribute, like the
Doesn't
whole
mean the whole universe has that attribute.
yeah. But of course I agree with that. So
Okay.
I can point out
So
a small
then,
thing. I can point out a small thing,
okay,
but that doesn't mean the universe is
please.
small, right?
Exactly. So when you say that the universe, the identity of the universe is all powerful, um, it feels like it. I would just say that I would say basically a tautology that like by definition the universe contains all possible power, right? The and all power happens within the universe, like within reality. Um, but to me, that's just kind of a tautology. And when you say that the identity of the universe is all powerful, um, it feels, um, it feels like we're giving the universe almost like a will, right?
Well, you can argue for the basis of a will from those conditions, but
Okay.
but I mean, remember, I'm not really sure that what I explained was mere tautology, like a mere appeal to tautology. I mean, I'm undecided on whether or
Oh
not
yeah, no.
yeah, whether
I'm more appealing to like I might not be understanding, and the way I would say it sounds like a tautology, and I'm having a hard time understanding how yours isn't. But I'm not accusing you. I'm not sure. That's all I'm saying.
okay, but I mean, if it if these statements can be expressed as a tautology, that wouldn't mean that they're baseless, right?
No. Yeah, and I think the way I expressed it as a tautology was like sort of mundanely true. And it's hard for me to pinpoint why the way you are saying it is different, right? Help me understand actually the difference between saying what I said, which was that reality basically contains all possibilities, versus saying the identity of reality is all powerful or omnipotent, right?
Yeah. I'm not actually sure that there is a difference, because possibility comes from lack of constraint, right? So if there's when you're talking about different levels of possibility, you are talking about different levels of constraint. And
Yes.
yeah, well, if I
Which
say that reality
the
is,
universe seems to have.
yeah, if I say that the identity of reality is all powerful, what I'm saying is that the identity of reality is what sets the constraints. Right, whether the constraints.
Okay, the identity of reality.
Yeah, whether the constraints are logical, mathematical, or physical.
Okay. And just humor me. What's the difference between saying the identity of reality is what sets the constraints and just saying reality is what sets the constraints? What's the difference? I really don't know. I'm confused.
Because I guess the main danger would be semantics. So people do use the word reality to just refer to the segment of reality that they've seen, or the segment of the universe that they've seen. So
Yeah.
that obviously wouldn't perform the same function that the identity of reality does, because the identity of reality is something that we can only infer, right? It's something that can only be deduced, because you can't observe the identity of reality. You can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas when people talk about reality, they can sometimes they're just referring to the fact that there's a difference between observation and imagination. That's sometimes what they mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. So let's see. With the explanation you just gave, I think it is a really good point to say that when people talk about reality, often they mean what they observe about reality. And I guess if you haven't observed all of reality, I mean, again, I feel like I would just say reality, by definition, is just everything. Like we talked about earlier, compared to like maybe the universe, which I would say is more like what we know about reality, or at least some of what we know about reality. So, did you explain the using the term identity? Is that where that came into it for you? The identity of reality versus just the word reality?
Yeah. So I think that the issue would be for that people might misunderstand, right? So they might think that by reality I'm just talking about the kind of colloquial way in which people use it, right? So they say, oh, it's reality, as in it's just stuff that happens, or stuff that has happened, rather than stuff that I could conceive. Whereas if I refer to the identity of reality, I'm actually talking about something which can be given these particular properties, because it doesn't change, right? So,
Okay.
like if you ask people, does reality change? They'll say yes. But if you say, if you explain to them what the identity of reality is, and then you ask them, can that change? Well, they can't consistently say no, because
I see.
yeah, the identity is
Because
that which
it's
remains
the
constant.
identity over time. Yeah, that which remains constant despite all the variables.
Yeah.
I see. That's why you mentioned that earlier. That makes more sense now.
Okay.
Yeah. So, the identity of reality is omnipotent in the sense that the identity of reality, if I were to say all possibility, like reality contains all possibility, the identity of reality would mean all of the different variables of reality throughout time and space contain all possibilities and are the constrainer on possibilities. And you were saying that is omnipotence, meaning, if I can rephrase it in a way where I like to show that I'm kind of understanding, reality itself is the ultimate constrainer of all possibilities and is therefore all-powerful in terms of allowing for or not allowing for any given state of affairs.
The identity of reality is what sets the constraints, yeah.
Yep. Okay. So what's the next thing?
Well, because reality contains all the information that's real, all real information, and because that information is being processed, at least consistently with other bits of information, it's all being processed in a consistent way, that implies that there's a singular process that's responsible for all that, for all reconfiguration of information is being processed by a singular source, and that's going to be reality. So it also requires, so if, as long as you accept that knowledge is about information, and that knowledge is a process,
yes,
and that knowledge that knowledge, as opposed to belief, is consistent with reality. So a belief may or may not be consistent with reality, but for it to be knowledge, it has to be consistent with reality, otherwise it's not knowledge. I would say then that to process all information consistently with reality is to have all the knowledge. So reality is omniscient.
Containing all the knowledge. I mean, I don't think that an encyclopedia is I mean, obviously not omniscient, but omniscient implies not just that the knowledge is located there, but that it is known, right? Like, I wouldn't say a book knows anything, but it contains information, right?
Well, the
so
key,
I guess when you
the key would be the process, right? Not just the containment, but the process.
And tell me the process again, because I don't think I understood the relevance until after you explained the next part. So,
okay,
process.
Well, we know that.
Thanks for being patient with me.
Oh, it's fine. We know that information is being processed because it's being reconfigured in consistent ways.
Can you give me an example of what you mean by that?
Yeah. For example, the information of like the moon. So the moon is orbiting the Earth, right? The position that the moon has can be regarded as information that's independent of human thought, and then it's gonna do a full rotation around the Earth, and that's its position is being reconfigured in consistent ways. That is according to the orbit that it has, right? So there's some kind of consistent law. There's the consistent law of processing that's being applied to that moon.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying about a consistent law being processed or it being a process. I still think that seems like descriptive rather than someone or like some. I guess I would say someone is causing that, unless you don't think of God as like a being with will, but just like God is equal to reality and nothing more. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to go pretty soon here. It's a bummer too, because I have really enjoyed this conversation. It's been really... You're challenging me. I appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm going to chew on this stuff, and if you ever want to pop in here again and talk some more, that'd be fun.